Nostalgia and curiosity are a hell of a drug. Growing up, my friends and I had a small selection of wrestling games that we feverishly played, the two most prominent being SmackDown 2 and WCW Nitro. Yeah, I'm sure you can guess which one we ended up playing more of. That being said, my friends and I tried to get what we could out of Nitro time and time again. And many years later, when nostalgia came calling, I looked into the game and was shocked to find out that there was actually a sequel to it, WCW Thunder. And the curiosity was tempting to say the least. So naturally, I bought it. And well, it's terrible. I mean, what do you expect from a sequel to the mess that was WCW Nitro? It shares the same engine, the same movesets, and the same abysmal control scheme, leaving very little to the imagination as to what this game could be like. Regardless, let's suicide dive into the 32-bit botch that is WCW Thunder. Let's start with some positives. As far as the roster goes, it's not bad at all. You have all of your WCW superstars like Hogan, Nash, Macho Man, Bret Hart, Scott Hall, DDP, Sting, etc. Basically, you won't be short on star power for your main events. However, things don't stop there, as you have a decent mid-card with the likes of Raven, Perry Saturn, Buff Bagwell, Alex Wright, Jericho, and so forth. To my surprise, I was thrilled to see a fairly sizable representation for the cruiserweights of WCW, which is awesome as they were always my favorite part of the show. You have Eddie, Rey Mysterio, Juventud Guerrera, Psychosis, and even La Parka and Kaz Hayashi make an appearance. However, I'm equally as surprised to see how much of the Job Squad was used to fill empty slots. Like, do we really need everyone from Raven's flock on the roster? Billy Kidman being the exception, he's the only one I'm glad to have. Or do we really need these forgettable wrestlers like Horace Hogan, Disco Inferno, and Ernest Miller? I mean, I guess somebody's gotta do the job. Before we move on to the game itself, I have to touch on the one thing this game is fondly remembered for, and that's the rants that some characters have. I've gotta give it up to the developers that was a nice touch, and you can really tell who put the effort into their promos, as some of these are pure gold. You gotta love DDP and Macho Man's, they are truly professionals. Some of them are quite funny, like Nash's, who insists that you should pick somebody else, or Scott Hall's, which has a noticeably and laughably bad ADR job.
You selected Scott Hall? Big trouble for you.
But past the jammed up roster and solid promos, the game seriously falters at the hands of the stiff and awkward controls. Instead of holding a direction and pressing a button, a la the SmackDown or Aki Engine games, you have something more akin to a Mortal Kombat style input system, with moves being performed by combos like back square triangle, up triangle triangle, or lock up, and press square circle. It's a train wreck of a system that feels so counterintuitive to the arcadey pick up and play style that other games at the time offered. Thanks to these uncouth inputs, stringing together a decent combo of moves that you might find in a real match is almost unattainable and feels like a chore. You might luck out and nail a slam of some kind and be able to follow it up with a top rope move, but you might also fail completely and instead wrestle your controller. I sat down to play the game for a few hours and did manage to kind of find a groove, but even then I never really found satisfaction in the matches. And a big part of that is the universal moveset that each wrestler shares. Like, come on, I know I'll never see Rey Mysterio gorilla press slam Eddie Guerrero, nor will I see Mongo give someone a head scissors. I mean, for God's sakes, the guy can barely spear someone and the dude played football professional. And it's stuff like this that really limits the creativity of a game like this. I want to be able to do a flying hurricane rana, or a diving plancha out of the ring with Psychosis, or rake somebody's eyes with Flair, but instead everyone is limited to 20 or so basic moves. The only exception being the 3 finishers that each wrestler has, which do add some much needed variety, but don't save this sinking ship. At least you'll still be able to drop a top rope elbow with Savage, lock in the Scorpion Deathlock with Sting, and hit the spear with Goldberg, but even this only goes so far. Now, you do end up with a great selection of arenas and pay-per-views, as well as a few different match types like a Battle Royal and even a cage match that takes place in an empty void. And this does vary the play style a little, as does the inclusion of weapons, found alongside the ring. But once again, it only band-aids a much bigger problem. Plus, the weapons are all simple stuff that can only be swung at your opponent, so you won't be climbing any ladders or breaking any tables in this one. Graphically, the game isn't terrible. I mean, it looks bad, but so does every other 3D wrestling game of the time. Just look at the cardboard cutout crowd. But hey, that was normal for the era. So I won't hold that against it, especially since all of the wrestlers are at least identifiable. But my god, the camera goes nuts sometimes. Especially in true WCW fashion when your match is interrupted by outside interference. Like, good lord, how far into the void do we have to go just to fit all 4 wrestlers on screen? It's a bit much. Moving on to sound, it's passable. There is a strong absence of music during bouts, which is more realistic but leaves a lot to be desired. In place of the music, we do get the occasional and repetitive spot call from the announcers. But to compare to the SmackDown games again, I much prefer the generic butt rock with no repetitive commentary over the garbled crowd noise and doofy callouts of Thunder. So, is WCW Thunder... Did I even have to do this? Alright. Is it worth playing? Well, EA's feeble attempt to add some awesome WCW action to the PlayStation spells disaster. The controls are troubling and the movement is as stiff as a Ric Flair body chop, which makes Thunder a chore of a game to play, meaning that I can only really recommend this for a few reasons. 1, being nostalgia, 2, if you have a die-hard love of all things WCW, or 3, as a cheap laugh to add to your collection, as it still sits well under the $20 mark. If none of those reasons suit you, then I highly suggest you look to the N64 for an amazing WCW game, or even give EA's later effort, WCW Mayhem, a shot instead. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this episode, consider checking out these other videos right here, or even subscribing. Also, if you'd like to throw me a couple of bucks, you can support the show on Patreon.